It's another day to do business. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 55 minutes of current and relevant business talks. I'm Ini John Mekwa, and we start as usual from the global space, telling you what's happening with oil prices. We see it's rebounding oil prices from a 5-week low in previous day on concerns of supply disruptions after U.S. President Donald Trump's threats of tariffs on India over its Russian crude purchases. So we see for this morning that it's in the green, 0.90% for Brent, but it's still not back to the $70 level. It's still under that. It's $68.25, while WTI also gained 0.84%, and that's about 30 cents or so, but it's around $65.72 a barrel. Both contracts fell by more than 1% on Tuesday to settle at their lowest in 5 weeks. And that marks the 4th session of losses on oversupply concerns from OPEC Plus planned September output hike. Investors are assessing whether India will reduce its Russian crude purchases in response to Trump's threats, which could tighten a supply. But it remains to be seen if it will actually happen, according to observation by traders. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, remember, over the weekend, they had said that they will hike supply by about 540,000 barrels a day for September, a move that will end its most recent output cuts earlier than planned. And OPEC Plus pumps about half of the world's oil and had been curtailing production for several years now to support the market. But the group introduced a series of accelerated output hikes this year to regain market share. And Trump on Tuesday again threatened higher tariffs on Indian goods over the country's Russian oil purchases over the next 24 hours. Trump also said that declining energy prices could pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin to halt the war in Ukraine. And back here in Nigeria, capital importation into the country went up 67.17% year on year. Look at the numbers right there. So we see for portfolio investment, that was a major 92.25, and I heard a lot of that going to the market. While for foreign direct investment, that was really small, 2.24%. And then you have for financing sector, that's other than banking. So banking had a major one of 55.44, and other financing sector had 37.18. Other investments put together had 5.52% for Nigeria's capital importation, production and manufacturing, which should be a major driver, you know, at this time of the real sector. That had just about 2.3%. The National Bureau of Statistics disclosed this in their latest report, showing all of these details. And of course, the states also do come in, but, you know, some things, they have to be cleared about that. Meanwhile, looking at Lagos State, we see that the RMAF did meet with the Deputy Governor of Lagos yesterday and had some conversation about some of those revenue concerns issue. But before we bring you that meeting, the newly approved, well, that's that meeting that RMAF had with the Lagos State government.
So if we say that Lagos State generates 33% of the GDP of the country, it means that building that correlates with the progress of the country. So we shouldn't be emotional about it. Apapa and Tinkan Port is responsible for 89.8% of foreign trade in our country. Apapa and Tinkan. You can Google it. 89-point-something%, 90%. Now, every country that I know, Germany, UK, the port, 20-kilometer radius, the port is responsible for the infrastructure. That's not the case in our country. You need to know the amount of resources we spend, and they destroy it, because the volume of trucks that comes out is destroyed every time we rebuild. Because of what is happening in Apapa and Tinkan, a lot of the ships stopped coming to Nigeria. Our country became a transshipment port. They will stay in the middle and then start loading to small, because we didn't dredge the place. It's shallow water. But Lekki Port now, any ship can come there, any ship, no matter the size. So protecting those must be important. Marine operation must be important to our country. But we just allow our state, the state of Lagos, to carry that burden. It's unfair. Making progress for us as a people will be difficult if we don't do the right things. And I wonder what our own children will say about us if we truly cannot, as a people, do the right things.
Executives and stakeholders.
Well, Lagos Airport Hotel has a new look. At least part of it, the Harrow block, has been under renovation for some time now. It's now completed, and they proudly show it to the world.
Executives and stakeholders of Lagos Airport Hotel have invited their partners and international investors for the formal reopening of its Harrow block.
Today marks a significant milestone in our journey to restore the hotel to its well-deserved place of pride in Nigeria hospitality landscape.
After the speeches, the group takes a tour of the facilities. The management emphasized that the essence is to rebrand the Lagos Airport Hotel as a modern hospitality facility.
Nigeria has the opportunity to encourage, develop hospitality industry. But the point is this, and the problem is maintenance, sustainability. I mean, look at where we are here. It was built 83 years ago. And we could see that this was one of the best hotels in Nigeria then. But today, we need to meet competition. I mean, there are so many five-star hotels. We have, even a cool hotel is there. We have, Marriott. We have Radisson Blue. But we need to compete with them because we are the indigenous company. These are foreign companies. What do we do? The fact that we now decide that we should spend millions of naira to refurbish this. We see that this is the building that is still standing 83 years after. So the point is that after 83 years and we are still standing, then we claim that we want to be a world-class conglomerate. And the only way to do that is to ensure that we are doing the right thing, spend more money, make the best of the situation. But I can tell you that if you look at what we're planning, by first quarter of next year, by God's grace, we should be commissioning Premier Hotel in Ibadan.
Data from Nigeria's rebased GDP in the first quarter of 2025 shows that the hospitality sector remains a small slice of Nigeria's GDP at about 1.25%, while growing at 2.65% year over year, underperforming relative to the broader services average of 4.33%. Increasing its contribution will depend on facelifts such as this.
And now let's talk about the new oil. I hear data is the new oil in the future. Back here on the continent, they say the African data center is projected to reach a size of about 1.43 thousand megawatts by 2030, and the market's revenue is expected to grow from $750.2 million in this year, 2025, to hit about 1.71 billion by 2030. The overall data center market size is valued at 1.76. That was in 2023. Is predicted to reach 3.13 billion by 2030. And major players in that space. Of course, Nigeria is there, but there's also South Africa leading. So we have a challenge in front of us. They have major hubs in Johannesburg and Cape Town. Nigeria is a major player in West Africa. Kenya is described as an emerging center hub for East Africa. So let's delve into this, see if we can push Nigeria ahead of South Africa. I don't think it's a crime to be sentimental. We have right here in the studio with us a board member of the Africa Data Centers Association. He's also the Chief Executive Officer of Open Access Data Centers, Dr. Ayotunde Koka. Dr. Koka, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's
So,
great to be here.
I believe you're in Nigeria, so let's do this thing. Let's push Nigeria ahead of South Africa. But I mean, mean, data seems to be at the bottom of everything. You want to talk about innovation, you need to be data-driven. Policy making, obviously data-driven. Technology to renovate and all of that is data. Why is South Africa ahead of us again?
It's a matter of time. The initial wave of building our data centers started about 8 years sort of before. The data centers really have been around for a long time. But then when you had the internet boom in the 2000s around Europe and the US, they started to grow into what was not being actually built by large enterprises, but what were being built for them to now co-locate as an outsourced service. Because you had new internet companies coming in needing to implement quickly and so on. So that's grown across the world over the last 20 years or so. Now, ahead of Nigeria, South Africa really started to get their own local data centers rather than hosting data abroad. The time it takes to access that data, which is called latency, which is far away, is restrictive. It takes a few seconds and so on. So it makes, therefore, more sense to have data held locally, and there are data protection requirements that need that anyway. So South Africa, sort of set the trail before Nigeria around about, I would say around about 2009, 2010, with some of the players like Terraco and so on based in South Africa, Joburg. And then you hit a tipping point where the scale builds out. The data centers are actually, everything sits in a data center. Your phone, the things that run the phone, that runs telecoms, that run businesses, so on. Those technologies sit in a data center somewhere, and they need to be efficient. So that then started to grow in South Africa. They hit a tipping point around about 2014 when the scale starts to happen, and that growth has been happening. South Africa has around about 52% of installed data center capacity in Africa right now.
Wow.
It's the lead, yeah. But the real trailblazer behind that now is Nigeria, particularly Lagos. Okay, there are certain things that come together that make data centers successful in a country. Progressive, benign regulatory environment for telcos, for instance, availability of subsea international capacity. Nigeria is actually quite well served now with the Google's Equiano cable coming into Lagos in the last couple of years, which actually lands in the open access data center facility in Lekki in Lagos. The Meta's 2 Africa cable has landed. That will be going live shortly in Lagos and Akwa Ibom as well. So Nigeria is well served. So we have key players that have been growing and building that scale. What we call neutral environments that are not a carrier, or where they focus on co-location, companies like Rack Center, companies like Main One, which is now Equinix, and in the last 3 years building out open access data centers at scale. Those companies are now around. There are other sort of telcos building data centers, like MTN announced a big one, so on. So you're starting to see the companies that can build the scale really building out over the last 10 to 12 years in Lagos. So there's actually the opportunity for Lagos to now build out that digital hub. We're now seeing what they call these hyperscale data centers. What it actually means is, you could have very good smaller data centers, which is what we started with. It's a bit like a hotel. You have good smaller hotels. I guess Lagos 20 years ago, 15 years ago was, and then in the last 15 years, we have big 5-star hotels. That the same analogy for data centers. We're now having the big scale ones coming on board. Rack Center announced megawatts is the kind of power, is a metric that's used to define the scale of a data center. Either power, number of racks you have in there, or square meter size, okay? So Rack Center announced a 12 megawatt shell, right? Open access data centers is building out a 24 megawatt shell over the next, a few years. It's in stages, right? Equinix, one of the global companies, acquired Main One. They're building out scale in Lagos as well. Another company, Digital Realty, that acquired a company, Medallion, is building out in scale in Lagos. So the ingredients are coming together for Lagos to now build out to be a key digital hub, not just in West Africa, but for Africa. The geophysical location is ideal. It's half the distance from South Africa to Europe. It's very well connected with subsea capacity, reducing sort of that latency. And in itself, Lagos has critical mass to consume that data center capacity. The next stage for Lagos is for the large cloud companies to start to bring those cloud technologies to host here. Because then you find you don't have to host your cloud services abroad. You can host them closer to the point of use. And those kind of technologies are now starting to build out. Okay? As you get to that tipping point, then you then get the build out significantly. You see, data centers take time to plan, they take time to build. They're very sophisticated structures in mechanical and electrical and kind of buildings you have, the kind of cooling you have. Because these IT systems are very sophisticated, fragile in a way, okay? So you have to anticipate that investment ahead of the big companies coming in. And of course, it also generates local economy because you have local cloud providers. That tipping point is around about happening now in Lagos. So you see a trajectory where South Africa is still growing, so leveling out. We have facilities in South Africa as well. But Lagos is starting to build out. So a trajectory that's starting to move towards the South Africa capacity. You know, Nigeria is recognized now as a leader in terms of technology leadership with AI and development and software and payments, you know, and so on, and fintech. They all sit in a data center, right? So this now positions Lagos in Nigeria to be the next big location. We also talk, the other tier 1 locations, as you did mention, is Kenya.
Yeah,
Particularly Nairobi. East. Yes, there are some large facilities coming on there. Cairo, Egypt, and Morocco, Marrakesh. Those are the 5 leaders. But quite clearly, Lagos is a leader of those others.
Yeah, but the thing is, you mentioned Lagos for Nigeria. Yes, you mentioned Nairobi for Kenya and Cairo. But, you know, Morocco. So can we make it a country thing? Would that be too much to ask at once?
It can and will
because
be a
I mean, one of the
thing.
reasons we have things like housing deficiency and a deficit is because everybody's going to one direction.
Yes.
So it would be nice if we could spread it out. Okay. We have big cities like Port Harcourt, River State, Abuja, and all of that.
That's a good point. So we have an approach, a strategy in Africa, where what we call the core are the large data centers, and the edge ones are the smaller ones closer to the point of use. Because of this latency thing. Nigeria's scale is significant, so we know you need data centers located at other parts of different scales to meet the demand for that scale. So you see more growth coming in locations like Port Harcourt, Abuja, for instance, and other smaller data centers across other parts of the country. You're seeing some being built in Kano, for instance. Another key part of this is the penetration of broadband, meaningful broadband, and fiber, and so on. You know, and you know, you've heard the announcement of the initiative to build, probably started by the Federal Ministry of Digital Economy, Innovation and Digital Economy, around 90,000 kilometers of fiber being built out. Okay, that allows the connectivity to those data centers to happen elsewhere. This all comes together like integrated digital infrastructure that powers the economy, right? So the scale will be in Lagos, the sheer scale of Lagos, the connectivity of Lagos, the momentum that's being built. And the other thing to bear in mind is the economic impact of the data centers.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Yes. I mean, because all you've said now, our appetite is, is awakened, yes. You know, but what can we expect? How can we expect it to affect job opportunities, investment opportunities, even government policies to boost economic activity? We are aiming for a $1 trillion economy in the next couple of years. So what areas can we expect to feel the impact of this boost that's coming in the data?
So it's a key generative anchor of a $1 trillion economy because technology will be a significant drive for that $1 trillion economy. Everything sits on some form of, most things sit on form of technology somewhere, directly or indirectly. So if you have that core infrastructure in the fabric of your economy, it's a significant advantage and requirement for that growth. So one example, in terms of getting connectivity out there, it's known in research and reassessed that, for every 10% penetration you have of broadband penetration, it can actually raise GDP by 1.5 to 3%, depending on the kind of economy. An emerging economy like Nigeria, actually, it's a high impact on GDP. That's that connectivity. All that stuff sits in a data center somewhere in the country, okay? Now, the research has also shown that for every, say, $10 million you spend on a data center, the direct and induced impact on the economy could be 50-fold, okay? Now, if you have just general, it's easy maths to say, okay, 1 megawatts, it takes, say, $10 million to build. Some who do it inefficiently might do it for 15 million. Some who do it efficiently might do it for less, but nice round figure. So if you build a 10 megawatt data center, assume it's $100 million. Now, the impact direct or induced in the economy, okay, could be significantly higher into $1 billion for that to about $5 billion. You see what I mean now in terms of economic impact? Why? You've got very expensive designers and very highly skilled people who design the environment. It's a very, very specialist skill. You then have the economy of building the buildings to very, very precise requirements. And then you have the mechanical and electrical that you build to fit this stuff out and so on. And of course, you then, support businesses through technology and the cloud providers who then bring all of that in. And then, of course, as you build it, you need to continue to support it. So you're employing security people, they're highly secure environments. You're employing engineers to manage your power infrastructure. Actually, you're growing demand for power. So the power providers have to grow their own economy to meet your demand for power. The support people that have to maintain the environment have to have highly skilled employees to provide the support. So that circularity, that interchain of events is where you then see the really big impact on the economy. So it's going to be a huge economy, not just directly towards the $1 trillion economy, but it actually underpins a lot of all of the other businesses that need to grow. If you look at agric, for instance, you have agri-tech. They sit on technology, on cloud services that will consume, that will depend on the data centers. Another key thing, finally, is what's happening with artificial intelligence, okay? Which needs all that cloud technology to operate anyway. Previously, people thought, oh, well, artificial intelligence, the learning modules and so on will need data centers in Europe and so on and stuff. But what's emerged is that latency is actually very key for what is called agentic AI, where you're interacting more dynamically with an AI agent or an AI environment. Those things now need what we call sovereign AI platforms. Well, you see what's happening in Nigeria with the technology growth, and Nigeria being a leading technology hub in Africa. It's inevitable that the AI capability will need to be built locally and consumed locally and growth locally. We have to have the infrastructure in place that prepares us ready to be able to deliver that demand.
Yeah, obviously, we need to build for local, consume local, and then we can...
And that's where that tipping point of growth is going to come
outside.
from.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayatunde Coker, board member, Africa Data Centers Association, and also the Chief Executive Officer of APNEC, Open Access Data Centers. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
All right, now let's go to Abuja studio where we're discussing housing, the housing gap and the role of mortgage. Well, there's a conversation we've been having, but how much of it have we been able to cover with a deficit of, I believe, about 18 million, double digits, obviously, 18 million households left as a deficit. Obviously, there's something that has to be done about it, yes? So let's discuss with a member of the Governing Council of the Institute of Mortgage Brokers and Lenders of Nigeria, Dr. Bernard Mohammed Doro. Dr. Doro, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we've been talking about housing deficit for how long? Nigeria needs to build an average of 550,000 to 700,000. These are numbers that we've been hearing every year. And of course, we believe that there's hope coming from mortgage. But then this week, I had an earlier conversation how the purchasing power of Nigerians won't even allow them to access the mortgage. So you are a mortgage broker. You are the governing council of an institute, a mortgage institute. How do we solve this problem, really, in reality?
Right. So, sorry, I missed you there because there was a problem with the connection. But the Institute of Mortgage Brokers and Lenders of Nigeria obviously was it's an act of the National Assembly which was established in 2022. And it is meant for regulatory and also ensuring that there is professionalism and excellence in a mortgage practice. So, how in solving the housing problems in Nigeria, I think in a way by professionalizing the industry, both the mortgage and real estate industry, and ensuring that professionals who work in these sectors are actually regulated and are actually certified and trained properly. That will help us to then be able to establish, ethical practitioners that will help in ensuring that Nigerians have access to mortgages so that they can own a home for themselves.
So you don't think it's the issue of the purchasing power, perhaps the requirements are too high for an average Nigerian?
Yes, that is arguable that, yes, the purchasing power is at issue here. But what we're saying is that there are several incentives from governments that could help Nigerians to be able to access mortgages. And also Nigeria, if the sector is well regulated, and then working in sync with government, and I'm very sure that that can be achieved. And that is where the Institute of Mortgage Brokers and Lenders of Nigeria come into play. And the institute do not only regulate the mortgage sector, it also regulates the real estate sector. So working in sync with these two different sectors can then be able to help us access more mortgages in Nigeria while lowering the cost of housing overall.
But some people have said perhaps if we really want a low-cost housing or low-cost houses, we should look at the raw materials, the building materials. How much of it do we get locally? How much of it can we innovatively get locally and cut out the import bill, that has been increasing that cost?
Yeah, it's important. Obviously, anything that when you look at the value of the dollar vis-a-vis the exchange rate to the naira, obviously importation of raw materials will cause us a challenge. But again, Nigeria as a people, we have this flair for foreign goods and what have you. But we have a massive local alternatives, and the raw materials that we have here for housing is quite good and is available. And if we can utilize that opportunity to then begin to look inwards and begin to use the raw materials that we have here, definitely it will reduce the cost of building houses and ultimately reduce the cost that people incur when they want to access housing. So accessing low raw materials locally will give a greater number of Nigerians an opportunity to own their own houses, and mortgages can help. And also the real estate also developers and what have you can help in that regards to ensure that housing is available. And like we say at the Institute of Mortgage Brokers and Lenders of Nigeria, that housing is a human right issue. And so there needs to be a collaboration between the private sector and government to be able to ensure that Nigerians have access to housing.
So is it possible for your institute to work maybe perhaps with some developers to intentionally channel the desire or the demand of locally produced raw materials into the development of buildings so that we can come up with at least affordable houses?
Yes, of course, we do have a free market economy, as you know, we're all aware. But the role of the institute also is to train and to certify personnel or professionals that will work within this sector. And so through that, we have designed modules that will incorporate how you know, developers can be equipped in their sourcing of raw materials, how they can be equipped in looking for low-cost alternatives in developing housing, and also to ensure that the sharp practices that are prevalent within the industry is checkmated. And once we do this, and I'm sure that we're able to streamline the housing sector and ensure that it is cheap and affordable unto people. So, and if you look at the housing sector generally, be it the mortgage or the real estate, you know, sector, you will agree with me that you know, it has huge potential to impact on our country's GDP. And as a result, developing this properly will help us. And it's also an area where there are lots of you know, issues around money laundering and all of those stuff, which then contribute to making the cost of housing very, very expensive, because people find it very easy to just channel illicit funds through that. And so the competition in the market can be so fierce. As a result of this, it can increase costs. So the IMBLN is there to ensure that the sector is, you know, is sanitized and professionalized, and so that we can work in sync with government to ensure that Nigerians have access to housing. And like I said earlier on, this is a human right issue, and so it must be taken seriously.
Yeah, well, that's a topic you brought up there. That's talking about the illicit fund, you know, and you know, using the real estate and all of that. That obviously has been on a lot of lips, but I think a lot hasn't been done towards it. So when you say you're trying to clean the industry or the sector, the real estate sector, from, you know, being used for money laundering and all of that, how are you doing that? And what agencies are you working with?
Yes, obviously, the Act empowers the institute, IMBLN, to obviously work with relevant agencies. So we have been talking with the EFCC and working on a MOU to be able to achieve this. We're also talking with ICPC. We are talking with the police. We're working with the practitioners themselves and trying to bring everyone into the firm so that we can all join hands. So obviously, working with the ICPC, EFCC, and the police, we can then be able to synergize and ensure that the sector is cleansed of the use of illicit funds, and also, you know, through the housing sector. I mean, statistics are there to back that up, and we see that it's a huge problem in money laundering and also terrorism financing. So I'm sure the collaborations that we are doing currently with these relevant agencies will help us to sanitize this industry. And once we do that, I'm very sure that has a direct link with the entire sector, and will be able to bring the sector into compliance, and also such that we can build affordable houses, and that's the point I keep emphasizing, because a large percentage of Nigeria have access to housing, and that should not be the case. We have the potential, we have the resources to be able to build cheaply for our countrymen, and that is what the institute is focused on doing, and working with our partner agencies and relevant departments and the federal government. We can be able to achieve that.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. We certainly wish you the best, because, as you said, housing should be, basic right of Nigerians. A member of the Governing Council, Institute of Mortgage Brokers and Lenders of Nigeria, Dr. Bernard Doro, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the Society of Petroleum Engineers have concluded a 3-year annual conference. They had the 48th edition in Lagos. Let's give you a little bit of some of the conversations that they held there. The 48th edition of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigeria Annual International Conference and Exhibition has representation from every major player in the oil and gas sector, dissecting core issues of operation that should lead to a more efficient industry. Gas receives prominence.
We have expanded gas supply for industrial use, prioritizing gas availability for manufacturing hubs, power generation, and industrial corridors. As of today, I have been reassured that every gas off-taker currently receives the gas they require for their industrial processes. Rolled out LPG penetration program distributing cylinders across the 6 geopolitical zones.
Supply chain optimization is also an important area that requires coordinated actions, since sustainable energy depends on efficient delivery systems. This will include connected gas transportation and distribution lines, virtual pipelines, commodity exchange platforms, enhanced marine and land logistics, and liberalized markets.
While appreciating the society for collaborations in the industry so far, NUPRC is asking for even more cooperation for a more bountiful sector.
Through an industry-wide implementation vehicle, we will enforce policy frameworks and valorize stranded or marginally economic oil and gas resources through joint development strategies. In a similar vein, the Commission is pursuing the project 1 million barrels of oil per day incremental initiative, with modest gains recorded owing to multi-stakeholder collaborative approach adopted. We are glad to report that we have crossed the 1.8 million barrels of oil mark on peak production last month, with an average production hovering at 1.78 million barrels of oil per day.
The Society of Petroleum Engineers believe that there's a continuous need for industry players to hold talks such as this and to pursue the result until it gets to reforms and implementation. Well, congratulations to them there on the conclusion of their annual meeting. Now let's talk about logistics, the supply chain. At the heart of all businesses is moving those goods from one end of the country or from the factory down to the market. That is a huge one, and we know here in Nigeria that freight and logistics market is estimated for this year, at the end of this year, to cost about $10.95 billion. And that's supposed to hit $15.05 billion by 2030. That's in 5 years. E-commerce is at the heart of it. We had that conversation, with the data center and what data has to do. E-commerce is going to generate about $10.1 billion, by 2027. The market value of that, the expected annual compound annual growth rate is placed at about 6.57%. Key drivers should be expanding manufacturing, e-commerce. We saw the services sector driving the rebased GDP, and of course, e-commerce at the heart of it. Let's find out how we can achieve all of this by building an integrated ecosystem right there. We're doing it with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kawai Technologies Limited, Mr. Kimbo Akin Olugbade. Mr. Olugbade, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. So we talk about data, we talk about the manufacturing sector, we talk about services, but at the heart of it, we have the logistics and supply chain at the heart of it. The issue of lack of coordination in that ecosystem seems to be one weakness that Nigeria has, but please confirm if that's true or not.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that the system operates in silos. Every player is operating almost independently, building out their own rail lines, as it were, to get their goods from the manufacturer down to the end user. And that's compounding the problem with pricing, and it makes it just more difficult to get things done. We talk a lot about the circular economy. The circular economy can only work if inputs from one end go to another company for them to produce and get things done. So we have to now see how the government, as well as private sector, can help connect the dots. How do we get our farm produce, for instance, how do we get that from point A to point B to maybe the warehouses, then down to the manufacturers, and then onwards to the supermarkets and markets where consumers eventually need those. And that same thing happens across all the industries.
So who should do this? Do we need to create a ministry?
No,
do we need to create a ministry for this again?
No. So on the government side, we need government to just help us with infrastructure. Make sure the roads are there. I was on a train to Ibadan a couple of weeks ago, and I was very happy to see halfway through around Ewekoro, I saw there were rail carriages for freight. So that means goods and products are moving by rail, but we need a lot more of that. If you take America, this is where Vanderbilt made his money, Carnegie Mellon, JP Morgan, James Hill. These are the men who built America, as it were, 100, 200 years ago. We need the equivalent in Nigeria. So we need the rail lines to really get all over the country so things can move. Road networks, this is highly important. We know the state of our roads, but it's getting better slowly. On the private sector side, we need to start thinking not just of our own businesses, but our businesses in relation to other businesses. What do I have that could be an input into a secondary business? There's a project we did, for instance, earlier in the year, and ordinarily it would have required importation. It was something to do with a hospital in Abuja, and it was the lab surfaces. And the long and short of it is we were able to get the stainless steel in Nigeria, get that then laser cut and bent in Lagos as well, and then get that finished to the end requirement by the customer and sent onto Abuja. We need more of that. We need more discussion, more interlocking value chain connections in the industry.
I guess that's why you have chambers and you have associations. These are supposed to help cut out the gaps and bring, from maybe one end product being the raw material for another process to begin.
Yes, so I'm Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I think one of the main advantages of an institution like the LCCI is that there are hundreds, if not thousands of companies, and you being a member, you get to see what other companies are doing. And then that gives you ideas of, okay, maybe I can plug in here, maybe I can plug in there. So I think it's putting those companies together that gives you the potential opportunities to change things in that way.
What about government policy? Is it pushing, industries towards that,
Yeah, I mean, the government's doing its part. They're trying, and people forget that Nigeria is a massive, massive country. And there's so many different sectors, so many different states, each with its own peculiarities. So I want to say that the government is trying its best in a difficult situation, but they still need to do more.
But it's still the government, exactly,
yes.
that we need to do. But so when we look at our supply chain, you talked about infrastructure and, the need for cooperation between, different arms. How else do you think we can optimize there? Because, for instance, when we talk about agriculture, we talk about post-harvest losses. When you look at the supply chain, you see that that is a weakness. There are lots of weaknesses.
Significant weakness.
Right there, you know. This week I spoke to someone from poultry, and he talked about how at the farm gate, eggs are now cheaper, but it hasn't translated to the market. There's the supply chain issue right there. So what do we really need to cut out some of these things and make it more efficient?
So we're back to the infrastructure problem. So if you take agriculture, tomatoes, we lose something like 30% from farm to market. Why is that? There's no cold chain. There are no refrigerated trucks. None of that exists. And you can understand why people don't want to make that investment. You invest in that, and then you have bad roads, and then these trucks are significantly more expensive than ordinary trucks, and then you're going to then deteriorate them faster because the road networks are bad, and then you lose that investment. So it's not yet worthwhile for people to make that investment. So the government can help us with make the roads better. It is a simple fix that has a multiplier effect on the economy. If you take other aspects of agro, you mentioned poultry. Funnily enough, years and years ago, I had a poultry farm. And what was the issue? Why did we stop doing that? It was because of consistency. Your pickups have to be scheduled. They have to be carried in special trucks. The end user wants a specific weight to get the personnel that are going to make sure you get the 2 kg chicken weight, and it became very hard to have consistency along. So I think education is also needed as well. You need to educate the farmers. You need to educate the smallholder farmers. I was in Kano last year, and a friend has 6 farms and was waiting to determine when best to plant. And I was like, why are you waiting? I was like, because he didn't know when it was going to rain. I was like, in 2024 at the time, it's a Google search. It was like, weather report for the next 10 days. And what happens there is because some people had already planted, his farm harvest will then be at least 2 weeks after the other people, which means they will get the best prices. So again, farmers need information. The government at the local government level could help with that, getting the information to farmers. Tractor programs. I know the government just did an investment in, I think it was 3,000 tractors. Things like this might be more useful to farmers. Tractor hiring programs. We did a project in Damaturu years ago, which the tractors were then divided into local governments and then rented out to the individual farmers on a daily basis. But the problem there is who is responsible for the maintenance of those tractors. So maybe tweaking that model a little bit so that the stakeholder is maybe the largest farmer in the community and they have a vested interest in keeping those tractors running. That might help.
Yeah, and I mean, we're almost out of time, but I'm thinking if it's this difficult within the country, we're talking about exports. That would be even more difficult.
Yes and no. So one of the issues with exports is standardization. And we have the SON is doing a decent job, could be better. We have private sector participants like SGS, Bureau Veritas. You need to get your products tested. Make sure they conform to the international standards. Make sure the moisture content, if it's agri-related or charcoal or anything like that, make sure the moisture content is appropriate. Because these are things that trip us up when we get into the international markets. If it's medical-related products, talk to NAFDAC. Make sure you have all the required certifications. At the same time, over-regulation is a little bit of a problem. If you take cosmetics, for instance, in the UK, topical cosmetics aren't really that regulated. Why? Because it's on the surface of the skin. So you don't need to be as stringent with the regulation. Whereas in Nigeria, even topicals, heavily regulated. So the government needs to know when to not push so hard and when to step back to encourage the sector.
All right, thank you so much for that, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kawai Technologies Limited, Mr. Kimbo Akin Olubade. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a short break. We'll be back with Global News with Ladi Williams. Please stay with us.
We live in an era of massive innovation.
You're welcome back. It's still Business Morning, and it's time to go global now with Laddie Williams.
Oh, yes, Ini, we global now.
We're global now.
At this point. All right, let's move strictly now. Start with Europe. You see, Germany is set to establish a €100 billion sovereign investment fund aimed at shoring up strategic sectors such as defense, energy, and critical raw materials. The move comes as part of a broader shift away from Germany's traditional fiscal restraint and is tied to a sweeping new investment agenda, including a €500 billion infrastructure and defense program enabled by a constitutional amendment to loosen the country's debt break. That's the fiscal limits there. This initiative reflects a recalibration of Germany's economic strategy, transforming defense readiness into a catalyst for industrial growth, while also boosting energy security and technological autonomy amid mounting geopolitical uncertainty in Europe. Meanwhile, German factory orders that dropped unexpectedly for a second consecutive month in June, reflecting waning demand and uncertainty as lingered over a pending trade deal between EU and the US. Businesses delayed capital expenditure, hesitant to commit before the terms of the agreement. It's not become that clear yet. Dampening industrial momentum at a critical juncture. The 1% decline in seasonally and calendar-adjusted industrial orders that fell short of analysts' expectations for growth, signaling a broader slowdown in the heart of Europe's export-oriented economy. The 1% decline is seasonally and calendar-adjusted industrial orders that fell short of the expectations there. To all the stories now, to tariff issues. Also, we see the Swiss president is slated to meet the U.S. Secretary of State there, Marco Rubio, to discuss escalating U.S. tariffs with the most dramatic focus on pharmaceutical imports. President Trump has hinted that these duties could spike as high as 250% within a year, though initial rates will vary across sectors, some potentially reaching 150% in the near term, while allowing companies limited time to adjust to the new trade regime. Let's look at monetary policy now. India's central bank, today they opted to keep its benchmark repo rate steady at 5.50%, with a unanimous decision by the Monetary Policy Committee to maintain a neutral policy stance. The pause that follows cumulative rate cuts totaling 100 basis points earlier in 2025, aimed at supporting growth while managing disinflation risks. Governor Sanjay Malhotra highlighted that U.S. trade friction poses mounting risk, with tariffs expected to reach 25% on Indian exports following missed deal deadlines, and that uncertainty around the impact of these measures that remains high. He described the effects as really very difficult to predict at this stage. All right, let's look at some earnings now in the U.S. Chip maker Advanced Micro Devices, as AMD, delivered a 32% year-on-year jump in revenue, closing the quarter at a record $7.7 billion, topping analysts' expectations of $7.4 billion. Adjusted earnings per share, that came in at about 48 cents, in line with forecasts, while GAAP EPS rose to 54 cents from 16 cents a year earlier. Profitability was squeezed by an $800 million charge tied to U.S. export restrictions on MI308 data, pushing gross margin down 40%. So you see that there, that's the gross margin that's down 9%, and a gross margin that's for non-GAAP, that's down about 10 percentage points. Operating income, negative swing there. So there you have it. We're still getting more earnings, coming out this time. Some are good, some not so good, some showing the pressures we're seeing with the tariff wars at this time.
Yeah, but data center segment, we discussed data.
Oh, yes.
And the boom that's coming to Nigeria or to Africa through Nigeria. I like to put it that way.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's good to see data and to see that Nigeria is not missing out.
Yeah, let's look out for in his data center.
I know, right?
At some point.
All right, Laddie, thank you. Now, just before we go, we'll tell you that the positive sentiment at the NGX is still on. Yesterday, the market was up 0.5%, and market cap is still around 91 trillion naira, and we're still at 144,000 level, but it's still a positive one, even so some profit taking, sipping into the market. That's expected. It's a norm. Anyway, investors put in money to get profit, so that's expected. We'll see how the market does at 1:30. Laddie Williams will be here 1:30. That's what it is, not 1 p.m. 1:30 with Business Incorporated. Laddie Williams will be here to give you more. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Enjoy the rest of your day.